Watch Symposium. I'm Austin. All right, so a paid question for Rat Skunk. He writes, asking for a friend. If Rolex replaced the dials during a service on a 1999 Rolex GMT Master 16700 and a 1988 GMT Master 2 16760, what type of dials would the watches end up with? I think the resulting dials would look quite similar in appearance to the original, but I'm no expert. Maybe a good topic for a video. Thank you, Rat Skunk. All right, thanks for the question, Rat Skunk. Really appreciate it. We're talking dial replacements via Rolex. So real Rolex dials, but replacement dials. Let's start first talking about the 16760, the Sophia Loren, or the Fat Lady as it's nicknamed, because the case was a little big to house the new GMT Master 2 movement that was able to separate the 24-hour hand and the local hour hand. This watch was made from 1983 until 1988, so just 5 years, and it's the very first iteration of the GMT Master 2. And it was also the birth of the Coke bezel insert. First time the world had ever seen the red and the black colors was on the Fat Lady. And all Fat Ladies should have a Coke bezel insert. It was never made with the Pepsi or the all black. So any Fat Lady you see should have the Coke insert. And that's one of the reasons why I think the Coke colors are quintessential GMT Master 2. All right, so how would you tell if it had a service dial? Well, at the time they were making tritium dials, right? They were using tritium in the watches, and you could tell it's a tritium dial because below the 6 indices written very in small letters, it says Swiss-T mark 25, and that indicates it's a tritium dial. And any Fat Lady should have a tritium dial because they used tritium dials up until 1996. And of course, this watch only ran until, from 83 to 88. So any original Fat Lady should have the tritium dial. And so if it has a Swiss or a Swiss-made dial, then that would be a replacement dial. All right. Now, that doesn't rule out that the watch in question, which is a 1988 16760, doesn't have a replacement dial, because they could have replaced the dial in 94 or 95 and it would have gotten the tritium dial. But, I guess if you were to look at the hands and the hands had patina, but then the dial didn't, that could be an indication that the dial is newer and a replacement dial. But that's sort of an unlikely scenario. That's more theoretical than practical, because usually it's the hands that go first. So I can't see a dial being replaced, but then the hand's not. So, but I guess it could happen, all right? So now, also, I should mention that Rolex always likes to use up parts. I don't think they ever really anticipated we would be going into the nuances of tritium or luminova or super luminova. They were just selling watches and using up parts. And so some of the last tritium marked dials were actually painted with luminova. So if you were to see a Fat Lady with a tritium dial, but the paint glowed, it would mean that that's luminova paint, and that would also indicate that it was a service dial. Probably serviced right, 1996 or 1997, that service dial would have put in, where they had printed the dials with the tritium mark, but they decided to not use tritium luminova, and so it didn't actually have tritium. It has luminova. So I guess that's possible as well. All right, and let's talk about the 16700. All right, so now the watch in question, 1999. All right, and the 16700 should be either tritium or Swiss only. All right, I've never heard of a Swiss-made 16700 Swiss-made dials, Superluminova dials, came out in 1999. So some A-serial GMT Master 2s have the Swiss only dial. That's known as just like a Luminova dial. And then some have the Swiss made, which is the Superluminova, even though it's an A serial. So sometimes you'll have an A serial with Swiss only, and sometimes an A serial GMT Master 2 with the Swiss made. Mine has a Swiss made dial, so it's more of a later A serial. And the 16700, which is just the GMT Master, not the Master 2, you can't separate the hour hands, the local hour hand and the 24-hour hand. That, from what I understand, never had the Swiss made marking. It was the last versions were Swiss only dials. And so this 1999 16700, if it has a Swiss dial, I think that's a good indication that it's not a replacement dial. But if it has a Swiss made dial, then that would be suspect. But if it has a Swiss dial, probably okay. But what's the difference between, say, an original Swiss dial and a service dial? From what I understand, nothing. So the only way to tell could be just to look at the watch's service history. All right. And there you go. Now, Rat Skunk wrote back, and he wrote this. I'll read what he wrote. He's talking about the Fat Lady now, which is a very collectible GMT Master 2 because it's the first one, and they only made it for 5 years. And he wrote, and I agree with this, the 16760 and the 16700 are my favorite GMTs. But as I mentioned in an earlier email, the 16760, the Fat Lady, is a bog, and non-molested examples are rare in the marketplace, which is rife with sundry permutations of service dials, service hands, incorrect bracelets, etc. If ever there was a watch with buyer beware written on it, it is the 16760. Agreed. And link in the description. There's a piece listed on Watchbox. It's a Fat Lady. It's got a non-tritium dial, all right? And the hands look new. And looking at it, I think probably the bezel insert looks kind of new as well. So that's likely full of service parts, and they don't mention anywhere on it, on the listing, that it is. So that's why you need to, if you're going vintage, dangerous stuff, because they're not really obligated to tell you that it's a non-original dial. I think the question that people ask is, are all the parts Rolex parts? The answer would be yes, but are all the parts original to the piece? That's a different question. And things are replacement hands, replacement parts. I mean, if you don't ask about that, they're not really obligated to tell you, because it's not like they're selling a Frankenwatch. I mean, these are all Rolex parts, but you're not getting an original piece, and that's what you want when you're buying these vintage pieces. So it's a very interesting topic, and thank you, Rat Skunk, for it. Rat Skunk was the same guy that had the haiku contest, of which thank you, Rat Skunk. I got one of the prizes, which was a couple holiday bears and a really cool book on the ocean chronometer. And I will read my winning haiku submission because it is sort of related to GMTs and suspect parts and whatnot. Here it is, my haiku. Black, Pepsi, or Coke? Which GMT floats my boat? Not the Blueberry. All right, let me explain that a little bit, because the Blueberry was a watch that had just a blue bezel insert. It apparently was never sold by Rolex, but they produced them for people in the Middle East, and they were quite a grail for a number of people. But now their legitimacy is coming into question. And did Rolex ever make the Blueberry bezel insert? And there's no real record of it, and people don't know. It's a hot debate, and the people who have the blueberry must be sweating bullets, and the people that don't are probably razzing the ones that do, because they're a little bit jealous. But also, there's not that proof from Rolex, and so there's even been on forums petitions to have Rolex state whether they made the blueberry insert or see, they're real cagey about the way they phrase it. I think they said something like, it's never been in our catalog. Yeah, but it was like special order pieces. Anyway, does the blueberry, was it ever, is it a Frankenwatch? It's a question that we may never get an answer from Rolex on, but there you go. Anyway, take care. Thanks for your question. Again, Rat Skunk. And if you have a question for me, check out the description of this video. And thanks for watching. Take care. See you next time.